Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the next president of the United States, President Donald J. Trump. USA! 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 USA!
You can never forget history, because if you forget, you never recover from it, and you repeat.
I worry that history may be repeating itself in many ways, and that what we are seeing here is the beginning of a movement away from democracy toward fascism.
None of us were expecting was a demonstration to turn into an all-out, insurrection at the Capitol.
Yes, it was an insurrection. It was a violent mob.
We had to stand up for the rule of law.
And if we don't make any changes, then another Donald Trump, or Donald Trump himself, he could do this again. That's what's so dangerous. The reason why the January 6th hearings matter now is because all of this could happen again, and we could lose our democracy for good.
Prior to January 6th, there were, I believe, two other marches, two similar marches that had happened in DC. And then the final one, obviously, was going to happen on January 6th, when Congress was going to be approving the slates of electors sent to them by the states. And so then, January 6th is getting talked about. Everybody's saying, yeah, everybody needs to be there. Everybody needs to support the president, protest, make sure that we fix this, right? Because we had all seen what I still believe to be a horrible injustice, not against Donald Trump, but against the American people, right? The American voter had an election taken from us, stolen from us, right? And we had seen shenanigans. We had seen all of the different things that, of course, the media would never cover, or when they would cover, they would tell us to not believe our lying eyes. Well, I understood from a constitutional perspective what was going on that day. And I knew it was kind of our last chance. Well, the cherry on top was Donald Trump said, everybody be there on January 6th. He made a direct call and said, listen, I need everybody there. We need to make our voice heard. Essentially, this is our last shot. And so from the moment that he said that forward, immediately I said, you know what, come hell or high water, I'm going to Washington, D.C. I'm just some random guy from Missouri. I was still in college at the time. I had no income to throw around or do anything like that, but I had made up my mind, right? I would sell my kidney, not literally, but, jokingly, I was going to make a way to go. And so sure enough, things worked out in a way that allowed me to go there, drove across the country. It was 12 or 13 hours, something like that. In the dead of night, we drove all the way across, and next thing I knew, it was January 5th, and we were staying about 40 minutes outside of Washington, D.C.
Jon Ossoff is currently in the lead.
The Perdue-Ossoff race is still too close to call.
And it will determine, as we've said, who holds power in the Senate.
You'll probably remember that the day before was the runoff in Georgia. I'm from Atlanta, and so I was up really late kind of keeping an eye on that election, and kind of woke up to the news that Georgia had flipped the Senate.
Fox News can now confirm that Jon Ossoff,
Raphael Warnock, has been elected to the U.S. Senate
in a razor-tight election.
But it was like a punch to the stomach, right? You wake up, you check your phone, and you see, these two Republican Senate candidates that had been leading by wide margins when I went to bed, they've now been declared losers, right? They have lost. And so again, it was one of these feelings, right? Whenever we woke up that morning, it was a feeling of like, wow, so now they've done it twice. They did it back to back right in front of everyone. And so we had to drive and get on the metro to go into, into DC. And I'll never forget getting off that train. I started a USA chant. I just, for no reason, getting off the train, we had entered into the DC metro, the downtown area, and I felt like, USA. And I've never heard an angrier USA chant. We got there probably 4 or 5 hours earlier than Donald Trump was set to speak. The entirety of DC was an ocean of red. I've never seen that many people in one place in my life.
Whose streets? Our streets! Whose streets? Our streets!
DC, as you probably know, is notorious for protests. So I knew that they were having the whole Stop the Steal. I knew that people would be there. I put on my Atlanta Influences Everything hoodie to hopefully take kind of a picture showing the influence of Atlanta, right? Just being a delightful content creator, okay? And I head down to the Capitol. My wife comes with me. When we get there, it was unlike anything I'd ever seen in my life, especially in my time of living in DC. It was probably the most chaotic scene I'd ever witnessed. People were parked just literally in the middle of the street. In fact, I parked in a place where I would never park because you would get a ticket. But I parked there because it was just an open spot and no one was managing what was going on. And that's kind of when I knew that something interesting was happening. People were chanting all of the regular Trump supporting things. They were saying Stop the Steal. They were chanting MAGA, America First. I was staying close, by with my wife. We were kind of walking around, just taking it all in, trying to find the right spot to take our picture. But there really was no right spot. I mean, you'll have to remember, this was January of 2021. And so COVID was still very real. There wasn't widespread access to the vaccine. It felt dangerous to even be outside in a place so tightly packed with people.
As someone who was there and on the ground and overwhelmed by the number of people, I would say it was between 1 and 2 million people that were there. It was unbelievable. So that really stood out. And then something else, this is going to sound almost a little bit strange. Thousands and thousands of people praying. People just started literally playing like praise and worship songs, like Christian. It was actually really wholesome. So you had this weird dichotomy where there were very angry people, but it was at the same time mixed with a lot of genuinely kind of wholesome stuff. Like kids were playing, there were people playing, worship songs, normal songs.
The real presence of Christian imagery and Christian people at this particular protest. I mean, there were so many people. At the time I was a pastor, and so I was very kind of acutely attuned to this imagery and even some of the things that were being said and sung. In fact, I remember explicitly that there was a gallows there in front of the Capitol. What really seemed to me, right next to this gallows, people were singing Christian songs. They were singing like actual CCM, Christian contemporary music, and I'll never forget the kind of dichotomy present in that really stark imagery of a literal instrument of torture while they sang about a person who was murdered on an instrument of torture.
So I made my way to the Capitol. It was somewhere I wanted to be from the beginning. Given the historic nature of the election and given security protocols in place.
I am a creature of routines. And I think part of that is being carefully disciplined about what I try to do every day and every evening. So I start the morning with a little coffee shop up the street. I try to get there just as it opens. That way I don't have to stand in line. And I usually have a hard copy of the New York Times. And I try to spend 1 hour with it from stem to stern, even when I disagree.
So I walked to work and stopped and got a Dunkin' Donuts coffee and, walked into the office in the Cannon House office building. And in my office is one of the few offices that has a balcony. I walked outside around 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning, and I could hear some of the protesters and see people gathering around the Capitol building. But again, I just thought it was going to be like the protests that I've seen a million times before. But I certainly didn't expect a day of violence.
I happened to look out the window just about 11 o'clock and commented to a couple of staffers that were in the room with me that seemed like just a regular day. I noted that the crowd didn't seem very big on the east side of the Capitol, and mistakenly pointed out to the staff, well, maybe there was an overreaction.
We weren't really told to expect anything out of the ordinary. We didn't receive some big intelligence briefing about a massive riot or any security preparations or anything like that. I knew that there were a lot of people coming to town, that we could see them outside on January 4th, January 5th. I knew there might be some protests or whatever, but never imagined what would actually unfold. Outside my window, I saw the Capitol Police assembling for a briefing in the morning, and it was obvious to me that they were not at all prepared for what was about to come.
A few hours after I arrived at work, it was time to go to the House floor to deal with certifying the Electoral College results. That, by the way, every state had already certified on their own. And so the House and the Senate gathered together in the House chamber, and then there was an objection raised.
Those members who were not participating in the actual count, we were positioned in the gallery. Given the COVID restrictions,
the objection was raised. The House stayed, the Senate left. Debate on the first objection began.
Madam Speaker, it is my duty under the U.S. Constitution to object.
And then we split up, and the Senate goes back to the Senate, we stay in the House, and we debate them, vote on them, and then we come back, and the process goes on.
Who hides evidence? Criminals hide evidence, not honest people.
I think I was probably there for all of the speeches. It was really cold, like really, really, really cold that day.
The fact that you are all here on this rather cold January day should be a message to all the Republicans who have not been willing to actually fight.
So anyway, I just remember miserably sitting there, freezing cold. I lost the feeling in my feet and stuff like that. I was really, really cold. And for what felt like an eternity, we just speaker after speaker. And I'm pretty sure that I was there for every single speaker up to and including the president.
Let's have trial by combat.
Patriots descend on Washington, D.C. This isn't their Republican Party anymore. This is Donald Trump's Republican Party.
They were kind of separated by like maybe 10 minutes. So you'd have a speaker come up, and a lot of times it wasn't like an immediate, the next speaker wasn't always immediate. Particularly, there was a big jump between the last speaker, whoever it was, and Donald Trump. There was like a 45-minute wait.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the 45th President of the United States of America, President Donald J. Trump.
So when Trump started speaking, everyone, it was like the energy of the crowd, the ground practically shook.
I did not know that Donald Trump was there agitating the crowd.
There were so many people that were trying to get close to the president to see him, right? To actually see what was going on. It was wild to me.
All of us here today do not want to see our election victory stolen by emboldened radical left Democrats, which is what they're doing, and stolen by the fake news media. That's what they've done and what they're doing. We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede when there's theft involved.
Donald Trump is the only president in American history who has not respected a peaceful transition of power. There have been other controversial elections in the past, but at the end of the day, it's especially once that president's advisors have said, you've lost, the president has handed over power.
But it's the toughest thing you'll ever have to do.
The best American is yet to come.
With the exception of losing the presidency back in 1988, I can't think of anything I would have preferred more to do. I'm sorry I lost. I think I could have done a good job of being president of the United States, but you have to win first.
And Mike Pence is going to have to come through for us. And if he doesn't, that will be a sad day for our country.
I thought he would be a little bit more pissed than this. It was like he was like, you know, we're doing what we're here to do, and we hope Mike Pence makes the right decision.
Because if Mike Pence does the right thing, we win the election.
In fact, actually, and a lot of people started to leave, right? That's why you have this timeline situation where Trump's speech ended only a few minutes, I think it was like 8 minutes before people broke into the Capitol building.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength and you have to be strong.
We did hear someone say, they're taking the Capitol, they're taking the Capitol.
Get back, ladies! Get back, ladies!
My wife and I, we walked a little closer to the Capitol. And by that point, the barricades had been run down in a way that I didn't even realize that we were walking into kind of prohibited area, into prohibited space. This crowd had pushed in significantly further than they were permitted to.
I walked over to the window that I had previously looked out, and they were at the window. And I mean, with the Trump signs and the banners and the flags waving, it was now chaos.
There's so many people. Let's go. This shit's ours. Fuck yeah. No, Bill. I can't believe this is reality. We accomplished this.
They began to assault the Capitol, and they were going through the windows. So at this time, this office in 208, I was surrounded by two staffers, Capitol Police, and the Deputy Sergeant at Arms. At one point, the Sergeant and Deputy Sergeant at Arms, she said, look, that table, which is massive, she said, we're gonna have to move that against the doors. And 8 of us picked up the table, brought it to the door, put the chairs against the windows that we had lifted, and turned off the lights, and we were told to remain silent. The last word that probably brought me to my senses was, she said, this is a moment of peril.
Wow.
And she said, I have to ask all of you to write down your names and your addresses as to where you're from, in case this goes awry.
I rise in support of my objection.
At that point, it was uneventful until we saw security personnel escorting Speaker Pelosi off the floor.
You know, her staff came over to me and said, would you mind sitting in for the speaker? You know, she has been called away, but, you know, this was temporary. Would you do it? I said, absolutely. And it wasn't unusual because I've done that 100 times before.
The House will be in order. Okay.
Then we started asking security what's going on. And they said, all we know is that there are people trying to break into the Capitol.
So I didn't really appreciate what was going on until much kind of later, as things kind of really got out of hand. My daughter Molly, she kept on getting texts. It was like, where are you? Question mark. And I was like, I'm taking over for Pelosi. And she said, well, but why? And I'm like, I can't do this now. I'm busy.
About that same time, my wife called me and asked the question, said, what's going on up there? I said, what you mean? I said, I'm inside the Capitol. She said, but they're already inside the Capitol. I said, who? Said, the Trump folk. And I said, Trump people?
bit chaotic and varied, and people had so many different, what I believe to be motives for being there.
I want a fair count! This is the United States! We just want to send a message. You're an American! Our diligence, our people died for this!
You know, I was there with my wife, and it became incredibly clear to me that this was a very serious thing and that this wasn't your everyday protest. And the momentum of the time, I think it really swept so many people up. The real danger, in my opinion, is that for those who ran toward the Capitol, they did so, I believe, with the words of the former president in their hearts and in their minds. I think they felt a certain sense of justification for being there and for doing what they were doing because they thought that they were doing it on behalf of the president.
I saw this with my own eyes. The Capitol Police, for whatever reason, started indiscriminately shooting some sort of a concussion grenade or like a flashbang. That was definitely a moment that turned things a lot, because that first boom, right? It was all of these people, and to the best of my knowledge, the 99.9% of all people had been totally peaceful. So all of a sudden we hear boom. Everyone like drops a little bit, right? You're in this big crowd, you hear a big bang like that. We didn't know what was happening. And so we hear this bang, and I'll never forget the crowd's response to that bang wasn't to like back up or get away from the building, but people instantly started going toward the building, like the whole crowd.
Without objection, the chair declares the House in recess pursuant to Clause 12B of Rule 1.
Shortly around that time, somebody actually broke a little pane of glass in one of the doors that leads onto the House floor. Capitol Police drew their guns. It was not clear at that moment how we would safely get out.
There's people flooded the hallways outside. We have no way out.
Security came and they said to people, get on the floor. And we said, get on the floor. You know, I got a gas mask next to me. You want me to get on the floor? And if these people are gonna break in the door, being on the floor is not necessarily where you want to be. Some of my colleagues got on the floor and some of us didn't. Then the thing that bothered me the most, as you know, members of Congress wear lapel pins. They told members of Congress, take your lapel pin off, because if the people are successful in breaking in, they want to hurt members of Congress.
Bring them out, or we're coming in! Bring them out! Bring them out now! They're criminals, they need to hang! They need to hang!
You know, and it reflected back on me. I beat 14 other people in Mississippi to wear this pin. And I'd be damned if I'm gonna let some crazy folk intimidate me to the point of taking it off. And so I didn't take my pin off. I was prepared to fight.
Officer down! Get him up! He loves you!
There were so many people, no one had service. It was a big enough group of people, you didn't have cell service. So there would almost be like roving cell service. And for some reason, I got service. And I got service right as Mike Pence had announced he was not going to do anything and he was going to accept the slate of electors.
Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country and our Constitution.
The moment that Mike Pence said he was not going to challenge the slate of electors, not going to do anything like that, I think that was a really big turning point, at least for what I observed in the crowd.
Bring out Pence! Bring out Pence!
From my perspective of that day, I think that's what was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, probably, for some people. And then the police, like I said, went back inside the building. And so I think that there were a lot of people who saw the barricades had been removed, the police presence was no longer there, and folks were just funneling in.
I expected expected this kind of violence almost every day in Iraq. We were trying to do a very ambitious thing, bring democracy to a country that's never had it. And we knew, the intelligence was there, that every single day there were terrorists trying to prevent us from doing that, trying to prevent the Iraqi people from having their votes counted. I never imagined that a president of the United States would do that here in America, try to prevent Americans from having their votes counted, try to overthrow our own government.
Call on President Trump. Go on national television now and demand an end to this siege.
I know your pain. I know you're hurt. We had an election that was stolen from us. It's a very tough period of time. We love you. You're very special. But go home and go home in peace.
We turned around and made our way back to the car. And it was actually very, very difficult to just get straight back to the car. There were so many people coming toward us and people trying to leave, and it was just so chaotic. But eventually we got to the car, and it was when we got into our vehicle that the first notification went out that there was a bomb threat in DC. And so there were so many cars on the road, people trying to, I believe, leave. I think that there were people who were trying to come in.
There was definitely a feeling of defeat for a minute there. But then there was a feeling, you're watching this scene. I'm getting text messages saying they've broken into the Capitol. They're in the Capitol. There's all of this stuff that's going on. And I remember not really knowing what was going to happen, but I knew nothing would ever be the same. Like, I had this overwhelming sense that this was a big deal. Like, what had just happened was that nothing would be the same, right?
That Capitol has never been breached like that since the War of 1812.
But it was also such a personal moment. I mean, I remember coming back home and hugging my two girls as tight as I could the day after.
We already knew how violent they were. We're seeing more evidence of just how absolutely vicious these rioters, these insurrectionists were. But we didn't know the degree to which Donald Trump knew all along, well before January 6th, that he had emphatically lost the election. The idea that there were still questions out there, that people inside the White House were supporting his false claims, is now clearly not true. All of his even closest advisors, his own daughter, was telling him, you lost.
This idea that is still held by people out there that somehow this election was not bona fide is nonsense. There had been an election, period, and Joe Biden won the election.
But as far as the people who broke windows, there's a lot of speculation there, obviously, but assuming it wasn't bad actors or maybe some sort of a plant or anything conspiratorial, I would say that they were just infuriated by the moment, right? If we're not going to go down like a conspiratorial, which I don't really adhere to the conspiratorial side of things, I'm not even sure that I believe it was Antifa or federal agents. It may have been, but I think it's entirely possible it was just really pissed off people.
I don't think everyone who went to the Capitol that day intended to storm the Capitol. I really am not certain if the vast majority, I'd say probably 75, 85, 90% of the people who were there had no intention of storming the Capitol or, using violent force to make their voice heard. For many of the people there, I could tell that they were just swept up in the pandemonium, just swept up in the emotion of the moment, and ran forward when they saw other people running forward, and ran away when they saw other people running away, and just kind of went with what was there and the momentum of the time.
So, do I think that mainstream media, by and large, got it right? Yes, I do. Do I think that Fox News got it right? No, I don't. And I'm not crazy about MSNBC. You should know that as well. But I do think in this instance here, for Fox to continue to portray the argument that the violent insurrection that took place on January 6th was somehow normal political discourse.
Was it a violent insurrection? It was not.
The January 6th Capitol riot was a gift
to Democrats.
The gaslighting from Democrats, the mob and the media is reaching record levels.
It was neither an insurrection nor deadly.
It was as sad as it was enraging. I mean, watching hundreds of insurgents rush the steps of the Capitol that I stood on with my daughters just days before, watching rioters trample over the hallowed ground where President Lincoln's desk was located with a Confederate flag. I mean, President Lincoln stood for everything that brought the Confederate flag to an end, and then there it was. You know, those were chilling images.
I thought, you know, all the bullshit over the big lie that Trump was pushing, that the election, you know, wasn't real, and that would stop. It would all be together and say, you know, this is a moment we have to come together. And I was wrong. You know, these people continued to push the big lie.
That some of the people who breached the Capitol today were not Trump supporters. They were masquerading as Trump supporters, and in fact, were members of the violent terrorist group Antifa.
I think a lot of us were hoping that that'd be a turning point for our nation and really for the Republican Party to return from this brink of extremism and put the future of our democracy over political self-interests.
We need to agree on a basic set of facts. I think as we have moved in more of a choose a side journalism in America, that has not been helpful to the overall conversation. Yes, it was an insurrection. It was a violent mob that ended up costing hundreds of injuries. 5 people are dead. And the world saw this unbelievable assault on the citadel of democracy, the capital of the United States.
That's what's so dangerous. The reason why the January 6th hearings matter now is because all of this could happen again, and we could lose our democracy for good.
We're going to have the greatest election success. We're going to turn our country around. We are going to win this. We have no choice. If we don't win, I think our country is finished. I believe our country is finished.